Welcome to the Putback here on SNY. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider. We're going to talk Knicks and the NBA for the next half hour or so. We got two great guests with us. We've got Steve Popper, a senior NBA reporter and Knicks beat writer for Newsday. And we've got DJ Kiingdeej, big-time Knicks fan, hosts Knicks Spaces, particularly the Knicks at Night Spaces. You can obviously find that on Twitter. Got a lot to get into, but before we do that, reminder, throw your fan questions in the comments wherever you're watching, and we will try to get to those at the end of the episode. And also, Putback is available in podcast form anywhere you download your podcasts, Spotify, Apple. So check us out there. But let's get started, as always, with the baseline. Knicks falling to a depleted Orlando Magic team at the Garden. Last night, Orlando without Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, and three others that you can consider rotation players. And this was a Magic team that was playing second night of a back-to-back against the Knicks team that had a day of rest. And this was just, to me, the worst loss of this young season for this Knicks team. I know that loss in Utah was bad earlier this year, but this one, for the factors that I just referenced, not good. Steve, your impression coming out of the locker room after that one?
It's hard to believe that we are, I guess, probably about 100 minutes away from being tied with Oklahoma City on the road, looking for your 10th win in a row. And then, to lose that game down the stretch, fall apart in Chicago. And then basically 48 minutes of bad basketball last night. It's amazing how it turned around so quickly here. But that's the league. It's, we talked to them about fatigue, some of the shooting troubles, Jalen Brunson, I think, we know he never makes an excuse, but if you look at what he's shot over the last, since he's been nursing this calf injury, I think last 8 games, he's shooting 21%, 12.8% from three. I think he's only attempted 1 3 last night. He's 1 for 10 in his last 3 games. It's hard to pinpoint it just on that, on injuries, on the Towns injury, on Jalen's calf, Miles McBride. But I think, look, I think the body of work they showed before that doesn't worry me. That this is a long-term problem. But as you said, ugly loss. Hard to imagine that a Thibodeau team let go of the rope the way they did yesterday.
Steve, trust the body of work. Deej, what about you? What's your panic level? What's your worry level right now after this loss to Orlando?
Well, I mean, obviously it was probably the worst loss for me personally since that Houston game in Houston that I went to. Honestly, I kind of expected the Chicago game, because it was Derrick Rose night and it was a back-to-back of the main event with OKC. So I was kind of surprised just because the Magic, we're down basically half their unit and their guys. So from a scale of 1 to 10 in, I would probably put it at like a 6. Hopefully, obviously, again, we're missing our bench unit. We're missing Deuce. We're still waiting for the return of Mitch, but hopefully they could try to fix that. Like Steve already said the numbers and the question marks on Brunson. Obviously, Cat was out. So hopefully they just have to get it back together, man. But they definitely need to start looking into other avenues. That's for sure.
Yeah, it can be interesting to see if the energy's there. Wednesday against Toronto. If it's another low-energy game, you're going to hear more questions, comments about the minutes of the starters. If you look at it right now, through 37 games this year, the Knicks have 3 players ranked within the NBA's top 7 in minutes per game, 4 players within the NBA's top 6 in distance traveled, 4 players within the league's top 7 in total minutes. Again, 37 games, not yet halfway through the season, but certainly not nothing. So, yeah, I think keep an eye on that energy early on Wednesday in Toronto. Steve, for you, the minutes, is it point of conversation for you? Is it not something that is worth talking about? Where are you on the minutes?
I think like you have kind of over the years, I kind of bristle at this criticism that Thibodeau takes on this. And you look right now, they're so shorthanded on the bench that if you want to win games, this is how you have to play it. And I think people that look only at minutes don't take into consideration the way they're doing things now. They don't practice. Practices have become almost, gone. On the road, morning shoot-arounds have been replaced by just walking through in the hotel ballroom. So they're really off the court a lot. So to me, if you say a guy's playing an extra 5 minutes, in the 48-minute game, I'm not having a problem with that. I guess where you can nitpick is, where what we always see with Tom is he never lets go of the rope. And, when you're, down 15 with a minute left and he's still got his starters in there, and look, it can happen in the first minute, but it's happened numerous times in the last minute and a half where, we had RJ Barrett a couple years ago got hurt in the last seconds, Jalen Brunson in the final minute, Cat in Chicago, games that are out of reach. I understand you play to win and you want to play a guy 48 minutes. I'm all for it if it's a game, but when it's not a game anymore, it's a time to get your other guys in there.
Yeah, that's the one I don't understand, and I probably won't understand. Tibbs playing with fire in those scenarios where you're up big late. And he's talked about just the idea that a lead is never safe. He's talked about coaching in that Tracy McGrady game where he scored 13 points with about no time left to come back to win. But, at the end of the day, you got to get these guys rest. Deej, I'm thinking about you here because, you see different opinions from the fan base, always passionate one side or the other. Do you believe Tibbs is the guy to get to the Knicks to where they want to go?
Oh, that's one of the most decisive questions on the Knicks fan base the last 3-4 years. And honestly, it all depends on who you ask. I got to be honest with you, man. Right now, between the people that are talking about the minutes police and the injuries and the history of it with Tibbs, I mean, they actually have a case. Me specifically, that doesn't really bother me. I'm more focused on what Tibbs does with late game execution. So I just got to be honest and call a spade a spade. That's what I'm trying to pay attention to more this season. But yeah, for the people that are, that have been saying, hey, Tibbs gets his players injured, I mean, they have a case now. I mean, I think what's bothering the fan base, especially after last night, I know he doesn't trust rookies. He historically doesn't trust rookies. Didn't even play Jimmy Butler back in Chicago as a rookie. I think he has to actually trust the Tyler Cole, trust the Ariel Hakporti, Pacome Dadier, because right now, if Cameron Payne's not giving you the minutes, if Landry, he's still recovering from his shoulder, I think he has to go that way. I think that's right now what's the argument with the fans right now, because that injury stuff, it's been there with Tibbs. It's been, as seen as given. I think what people are focused on is his late game execution, at least for me, and just getting these kids in here to back up the reserves when they're struggling. So honestly, I'm in the middle end. If you asked me last year, my answer would be no. I would choose a different coach, honestly. But you got to give him respect for what he does during the regular season. Got to give him respect for how hard they play. I think as a whole, the fan base is concerned between, is it Tibbs that gets these guys hurt or the regular season that gets these guys hurt? And how can we preserve them going into the playoffs? Because that's what we really need them all for. We don't need anybody hurt come April, May, and June.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I feel like fans sometimes forget what life was like before Tibbs.
Yeah.
When we criticize him, it's a complete culture change from what it was before. This is a team that wins 50 games now. That's a contender. And to Tibbs' critics, I say a couple things. There's always a cry of he should play this guy, whether it was Cam Reddish years ago or guys like that. The guys that he doesn't play, point to me the ones who succeeded somewhere else. He's never wrong on the guys that he doesn't play. And I think he does when a rookie is ready. I think like if we look back at Emmanuel quickly, he very quickly in the first couple games basically gave him some rope, and when he ran with it, he kept him in that rotation. Grimes earned his spot, pretty quickly. I think he does. If a guy fits, I think Ian and I, we're there all the time, but he sees them more than we do. He sees them on the practice floor. He knows what the film work they're doing. He knows what the matchups are. We can nitpick what Jericho Sims can't do, but I think we see like defensively rebounding. If you look at last night, like I know there was a lot of critics on Twitter about him, but look at what he did versus Bitadze, who's a good player. His numbers were better than his, so he kind of won his matchup. And to me, that's kind of what you point to there is, are these veterans able to do the job? Campaign hasn't played great. Kolek is a good offensive player, but if you look at the matchups where the team's got a 6'6" guard, you can't put Kolek in there against him. It's just not a matchup right now.
Yeah.
I think he believes in Kolek, but I think it's going to take a little time. We're still halfway through the first rookie year. I think he'll find his minutes.
Before we go to the next question, Steve, welcome to Knicks Twitter. This is what we've been questioning for the last 4 years. So, welcome.
I've been there. I've seen it.
He's lived it for the last several years. But I will say, Steve, to your point, Tom's track record on not playing guys who, the reporters or the fan base thinks should get minutes, it's pretty good. Kevin Knox, Dennis Smith Jr., Cam Reddish, even Obi Toppin, who, has had very good moments in Indiana. There was a reason, I guess you could see now, why Obi wasn't getting more minutes than Julius Randle. So I do think that the track record is there for Tom Thibodeau. The conversation about the Knicks front office leaving Thibodeau without enough on the bench, look, they went all in, right, with the top five, and they used a lot of their assets to get a really strong starting five. But I want to just add to that Tom Thibodeau, in my estimation, to my knowledge, is involved in the decisions with who to bring in and who not to bring in personnel-wise with the bench guys. And so you look at the bench, and yes, obviously the front office is heavily involved in these decisions. But to say like Leon Rose has dealt Tom Thibodeau a bad hand or anything like that, I just think you're forgetting that Tom Thibodeau does have a say in these personnel decisions. So I think that's worth noting when you're talking about a criticism of this roster. Steve, when you look at the offseason, you look at what they did to get to this point. Did Leon, or have they made a mistake here, leaving themselves too thin behind the starting five?
No, I don't think anybody would say that now. Like if you look at what Cat is doing here and what Julius and Dante are doing in Minnesota, you'd make that trade every day. And there was more to it than just the fit on the court. It was they didn't want to give Julius a contract extension that Julius wanted. Ideally they would have liked, and I think they tried a lot to keep Dante, out of that deal. And that would have changed the dynamics of the depth of the team. But I think what we're seeing right now in questioning is, as you look at this, McBride has been out. Shamet is just coming back. And I don't think this is the final sort of roster. I think things they've done here have been done with an eye on what the next move is going to be, whether it's, if Mitchell Robinson's coming back or he's being moved on somewhere else. I think that's an asset that they look at, they can use somewhere. Precious Achiuwa, they were careful with what they gave him and held off a long time before they gave it to him. I think they're still looking for an ideal piece. But I think as we've talked about before, it's not in the form of a rookie. You love those rookie contracts and you love those guys to contribute on that low cost. But I think what they want is a veteran who can help them win right now, because that's their window.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with Precious, one of the big factors, or a factor in that negotiation with him and the Knicks, was him waiving that no trade clause that he would have had, given that he signed for a year. And so he did waive the no trade clause, and they will have the freedom if they choose to put him out there on the market. Deej, put your GM hat on for a second, put your Leon Rose suit and shirt on for a second, and tell me what you would do ahead of February 8th.
Honestly, before this game, I got to be honest, I kind of like the team presently constructed as it was, even including Mitch. It's funny how, for me, and I can just speak for myself, I didn't give Mitch too much credit for the previous rosters. I think for this roster, he would be the perfect addition. Obviously we're missing Deuce. I think Landry was kind of the Deuce replacement to what Steve Popper was talking about regarding Dante going out in that trade. So, I think to me, it's not really the trade deadline that I'm looking at. It's more of the veteran waiver that whole week when the veterans get waived. I wonder if the Knicks would try to strike gold there, try to see what they could get in. I know Jericho Sims is on his way out with the 1 year team option, so that's what's always been on my mind. For me, it doesn't really make any sense to keep Jericho Sims if you keep Mitch and Precious along with Cat. and then you already have Ariel Hokporty that you just drafted. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do, if they can do anything with that. I know he's liked around the league. So it's very – this is the price that you pay for making your starting five so great, man. I mean, you can't have everything. As much as we would love to have a great bench with a great starting five, usually championship teams have one or the other. So Leo Rose, and I actually, salute to Leo Rose, big supporter since the day he got here. If he can make magic again, this would be the time. So I think whatever he does, I think the fan base will support it like we always naturally do. Give it about a month to see if it really hits or doesn't take off, like how we did the Burks and Bojan trade last year. So it's really slim, Steve and Ian, really slim, really slim, man.
Yeah, so we're gonna pivot now, more trade talk, into the What We Learned segment, which is presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. As far as trade, just a few notes here. I do think that you guys talked about Jericho Sims. I think that the Knicks will continue to have conversations on Sims leading up to that deadline, which is February 6th. Let me correct myself, not February 8th. And then you look at the Mitch Robinson situation. I was told that he's looking pretty good. It's been a positive trajectory since that surgery that obviously didn't go the way the Knicks and Robinson wanted it to go, which left him off the court for so long. More recently, the rehab's been going well, and I'll continue to say, in a perfect world, Robinson shows that he can be back and be healthy and be counted upon ahead of the trade deadline, and the Knicks proceed with Robinson on the roster. If not, I think they'll have some options on the trade market. They had interest in Jonas Valanciunas in the offseason. I would assume that they would circle back there if the Robinson thing does not work out as they hope it would. And then just another non-Nick note, Jimmy Butler. The focus there is Phoenix and Miami, and trying to figure out the machinations of that deal. And that means, where would Bradley Beal end up? Would he go to a third team? Would he waive the no trade clause? But I'm told that's kind of the main focus right now with Jimmy, the Heat, and the Suns. So keep an eye on that. And I'm going to pivot now quickly to our injury report, because we talked about Mitchell Robinson. No real update there until he starts getting cleared for practice and running, and that hasn't happened yet. With Miles McBride, the hamstring has been tricky for him. I think he missed 5 games last time he had the hamstring. I would expect him to be back for that OKC game. And then with Karl-Anthony Towns, Steve was in Chicago, saw Towns do a big workout after the game, after he left that game late in the fourth quarter. And since then, I've been told that this is not a serious injury, nothing long-term at all, and he should be back soon, maybe as soon as Wednesday, so nothing to be overly concerned about there. Steve, Mitchell Robinson, the absence, what do you think the Knicks can expect from him? What do you expect from him the rest of the
Well, a couple of things. Obviously none of us know because we don't see him, we don't talk to him. Yeah. It's a strange situation. But I have seen him, at morning shoot around, not on the court, but coming off of it. And he does look like he took off some of the weight that he had put on. I think some guys in the organization were a little worried about. But I think, I think the problem with considering Mitch as a trade target is that the same as other team, as the Knicks consider him, a risk, other teams do it. I've talked to scouts and some people, executives from other teams, and, they kind of see it as a tank move right now, because there's no belief that, a guy his size who's had these multiple foot leg injuries is not going to, succumb to it again. He's a good contract. He's a good player when he's healthy. But I think there's that risk there that people see, and they're hesitant to bite on it.
Yeah. I know that also with the Knicks being where they are in the CBA, they cannot take back more salary than they send out. So that makes trades tricky because of where they are. And then, you look at, they had interest in an Isaiah Stewart from Detroit in the offseason. be a tough deal to make at this point, given where they are and other names out there. I just don't expect them to make any kind of a significant trade. Brandon Ingram's name is going to be out there. Jimmy Butler, we talked about other big impactful players. I can't see the Knicks making that degree of a move with this team at this time. I think that if anything, it's going to be a bench player, help off the bench. Maybe it's center, depending on where Robinson is. But I don't think there's going to be a big swing taken at this trade deadline. And Deej, are you rooting for Robinson to come back all the way, or do you want to see them go in another direction?
I was a notorious Mitchell Robinson hater just because of this, the injuries that he has. They're always like nagging issues that kind of mess up our team. But this version of this roster, I am rooting for him because I think he fits in perfectly. I got to be honest. Like, I think playing Mitch with Cat, playing, Cat, giving Cat spot minutes, having Mitch come in, I think that works good with a Tom Thibodeau lineup, especially when you don't have to have Cat being overwhelmed at the 5, even though he's been playing fantastic. We still, as the fan base, still, like to expect some perimeter and paint defense. And, I think what Mitch does for Cat specifically, because it takes so many people to try to out-rebound Mitch, is that Cat will get open opportunities, open looks. I don't think he's got, like, that many open looks from somebody else being in the paint other than himself. So I actually am rooting for Mitch, and I actually agree with Steve and you. I just don't know what it would be to get Mitch a trade because, again, the same things that nag him, it would probably nag the other team. You brought up Valanciunas in, and that's another guy that's on my veteran waiver. I don't see a team trading for him with 1 year left when the Wizards could just buy him out and everybody pounce on it that way. So I'm looking more specifically towards that veteran week. I'm not looking towards the trade deadline because the assets that we have are so slim. So again, good suggestion from Steve and you, Ian.
I actually think the Valanciunas thing makes sense, and I've tried to ask about that because he makes less than Mitch.
Oh yeah,
I think so. It sort of fits in that way. And for Washington, if he was to sit the whole year, if Robinson that fits their tank mode. And you have a guy who's a decent player next year, on your cap for a low number. They do have cap space to absorb him, so it's interesting. Look, every time I think that something can happen, Brock Aller figures out some way to turn $1 into 10 million and make it happen. So I don't put anything beyond them right now.
And not only that, and Steve, but like the fan base knows this very well. Whenever we see a name connected to the Knicks, they get to the Knicks.
It's
Pat and Brunson all the way down. So
yeah.
It's funny. I think Steve and I were talking about Jalen Brunson not soon after, or a few months after maybe Leon took over because of those connections. And I'm sure we both uttered Karl Towns' name pretty early on after Leon took over too. So the Valanciunas things would be interesting. I do think Washington, I don't think this is posturing. I think they really do value him as part of what they are doing. That's why they signed him. So I don't think they're going to dump him for nothing. So it's interesting to see where that shakes out. And then in the here and now, guys, the 3-point shot has been a struggle for this Knicks team recently. Haven't shot above 40% from 3 since before Christmas. 4 for 22 last night, which is where I thought you really saw Karl-Anthony Towns' absence, his gravity, defenses pay attention to him, just creates open looks. Is this just a slump here, Deej? Is it something more than that? Do you see it as just kind of the law of averages over the course of an 82-game season?
I mean, Steve brought up the numbers with Brunson, but in a general, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, I don't remember us ever having a slump like this from 3-point percentage with any Thibodeau team, so it's actually ironic because we're so good as a unit. I think they focus on the 3 a little bit too much. I think they kind of went away from like the McHale mid range, and it could be due to fatigue. It could be due to Brunson with the nagging injuries because those two, Brunson and McHale, have lived in the paint. Cat hasn't really been shooting the 3 since the OKC game, so I don't know what's that to be said. But I wouldn't say that's an issue or a concern, but it is starting to become live by the three, but die by the three. And I just didn't think that this team would do that, at least not this early. So maybe they're settling, for the most part, like, again, the dog days of December, dog days of January, the grind of a season. Hopefully they could get the numbers back up. I know Deuce was struggling a little bit before he went down as well. So it seems to be contagious. I would just hope maybe they could try to balance it, because we've been shooting a lot of threes, haven't been making a lot of them either. So I honestly can't gauge it. If it's like fatigue, I think it might be more so towards that end.
Yeah, it's interesting that the trend lately, I do think they'll find it eventually. We've talked about a lot. We want to talk about now what you guys want to talk about. So we're going to our talk back section of the show. That means we bring in my friend and yours, Matt Spenley, SNY's social media guru. He's got your questions. He's going to relay them to us on the show, and we'll get right into it.
What's up, guys? Great show so far. Enjoying. A few questions I'm going to pass around. Ian, I want to start one with you, because I know we talked about some of the trade stuff, and I want to, right off the bat, our guy Fritz Alcindor Jr. on YouTube was talking about how last offseason there had been some discussion about Trey Murphy, and he was asking if there's any interest in a Cam Johnson similar archetype. Now, I thought this would be a good question, because you mentioned with the Knicks and their cap sheet, there is really only so much they can do at the deadline. So I kind of want to use this question as an opportunity for you to be clear with people about what we can actually expect them to do ahead of the trade deadline, given the money that they're already paying to their current roster.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, I think that as this thing approaches, things can change. That's how the NBA works. I don't want to say anything definitive, but I believe this to be accurate at the moment. There's no plans for some massive trade for a big name, big money, bench piece where the Knicks are bringing on significant money, bench or starter piece. I don't think that is in the cards at the moment. I think that the way the team is structured, they did a lot to put this starting five together. They want to see more of it, and then it's just about the margins. It's about maybe snagging a bench piece, or maybe, depending on what happens with Mitchell Robinson, figuring something out at center. But I can't see right now a big move matriculating if this group stays healthy the way it has been into the trade deadline. I think you're looking at smaller moves, back-end moves, which are important, but I don't think you're going to see, an OG and an OB type move, or even a Josh Hart type move with this group at this point.
There's a reason why we used to have stargazing as a segment on the show, and we retired it this year because they acquired all their stars already. Teej, I know you brought up, the buyout market, and I think that's what we're all going to just in the spirit of the question that we had last from Fritz, too. He had brought up, a wing-type player. Do you think that that's anywhere that you would look, or is it, I know you brought up Valanciunas, like what exact type of player do you think on that buyout market could they potentially look at?
Well, shout out Fritz, man. He's always in your show. He's always in the Knicks Twitter spaces, always showing love. So shout out to Fritz.
Yes,
good question. Just Cameron makes $100 million too much, but I think for me, and I want to give a special shout out to D Black, because he kind of convinced me on this. If we were to go a wing player off the bench, I think they would try to, just for balancing, like if you had to trade Mitch, if you had to, I don't think he is going to go anywhere. I would look at a potential Mitch for Grayson Allen swap out there in Phoenix. I don't know what the role is for Grayson, but over here, I think we would love him as a fan base. Well, obviously he gets a lot of hatred from other teams, but that's because of how hard he plays. Milwaukee also, when you saw what he did in Milwaukee, him and Drew as a backcourt, I mean, that was probably one of the best defensive backcourts that actually shot over 35% for three for an entire season between Drew and Grayson. So I think that will be one name to monitor. Honestly, I don't have too many names, Matt. I'm just looking at that buyout. I think keep in mind Valanciunas. I don't really like the Jordan Clarkson. I think he just doesn't fit. Not too many names, honestly. I maybe even Corey Crispert out of Washington. So like I said to Ann and Steve, it's very slim. These are the sacrifices that you make for making a good team or for creating a good team. So Leon Rose will have to do the hard work. I don't want to put any unnecessary names out there.
Let him do the work then. It'll become more clear, I'm sure, in the coming weeks too. Steve, I want to come to you with this one, just because I know we spent a lot of the episode and it's kind of hanging over the team right now, just the amount of minutes that each team has played. And I think the Knicks have actually had, pretty decent injury luck this year, all things considered. I mean, we haven't had any of their starters really miss any serious bit of time. According to Spot Track, they're 25th in the NBA, which, if you're lower, you're better, right? Because you've missed less time in terms of the basically amount of like cash per game that they've missed. So just curious, is there anything that you think they can do right now to potentially lessen that load? Because as I'm watching, I just always have that concern that all of a sudden, especially we saw early in the season, a lot of, star players get hurt in the NBA. There've been a lot of injuries this year, and the Knicks have been pretty lucky. So just to be specific, like, is there anything that with their current rotation that you think they could potentially change up, or you think this is just how it's going to be?
I am not even going to waste my time trying to convince Tom Thibodeau to play a guy 30 minutes instead of 35 or 37. It's just not going to happen. And look, at the point you brought up is the accurate one. There's teams and stars all over the league and who are missing time. The Knicks, to me, they've done. It's just been over years now that these guys are not getting the. Look at Orlando last night. 2 guys with oblique injuries, which you can maybe do to conditioning. Towns talked the other day in Chicago. We waited for him, Steph Bondy and I waited for him an hour after the game. He limped off the court. We're worried about him. He goes in and puts in a ridiculous workout. And these guys, that's what they do. They don't get time on the court in practice. They don't get it in shoot around. They've conditioned their bodies to play 82 games. Look at Mikal Bridges, for example. He's never missed a game in his career, and he's leading the NBA in total minutes. It's to me, this is an argument that I think just go in circles with people, and I just never see the evidence that it's a problem. As Ian and I pointed out earlier, if you tell me that Tibbs in a 15-point win or loss will take his guys out with 2 minutes left, I think there would be peace in the world. But I think that's not happening, and the thought of adding Ariel Huck-Porter to the rotation on a regular basis is not happening. And even what we're talking about, adding pieces, they are so tight to that second apron that unless they can move salary off, they really don't want to add salary. I think they've got to do gymnastics on the cap there, because if you get over that really restricts you, and I think they don't want to do that.
You guys, I'm just curious, quick. Like you mentioned, the Knicks don't really practice much anymore. Is that common across the NBA these days, or is that a Tibbs thing just because of how the Knicks play in their minutes? Like, do you guys get the sense that that's becoming a more common practice across the league?
I think it's more common around the league, but I think more Tibbs. I've seen it with the Knicks more than I've seen with other teams, in that they've really reduced the number of practices. And, I just came off a road trip and they canceled 3 morning shoot-arounds in a row. Oklahoma City, they had one. That was the first one we'd had in weeks. They're letting these guys just go in a ballroom and walk through, watch film, learn coverages. And they're veteran players, these guys, in their starting lineup. So they don't need, they all do their work. They all do their pregame work. I think they don't need the time on the practice court. Film is what does it for them. And I think, we've got to consider that when we look at these minutes.
As my man Tony and CP from Knicks Fan TV would say, Steve Popper just killed 1,000 narratives.
Steve Popper's going to get killed on Twitter now too.
You're good.
I'll clip this one just for you, Steve. I'll clip this one just for you. All right, Ian, that's what I got today.
Thank you, Mr. Spenley. Appreciate it. I have one more here. Let me pull it up. It's from my buddy. Anytime Knicks. Always appreciate you, man. And he says, it was mentioned in a mailbag that Houston possibly had interest in Jericho Sims in the offseason. Any update on that, or has that ship sailed? I do think that, the Knicks will continue to pick up the phone and hear teams out on Jericho Sims leading up to the trade deadline. Houston specifically, I'm not sure. I don't have anything beyond that, other than I do know that there are some fans of Sims in that organization, and they've continued to kind of ask me about him. But anything specific between the Rockets and Knicks and conversations, I don't have that. I would expect them to continue to kind of hear the market out on Sims and see where it goes heading into that trade deadline. So we'll see where this thing turns. But I always appreciate your questions and your interest anytime, Knicks. So thank you very much for that. And now we are going to look ahead a little bit, and the big look ahead, for me at least, it's Yes, they play the Raptors Wednesday, but you got Isaiah Hartenstein, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and the Thunder coming into town on Friday. Obviously, Hartenstein's first game back at the Garden since signing with Oklahoma City in the offseason, and these teams matched up in OKC very recently and had a very, very good contest where things kind of fell apart for the Knicks late. Steve, does this game matter to the Knicks on Friday? 82 games in the regular season. Does this matter for them?
No, they insist no, that it's one of 82, and I wrote about this the other day, but at some point, you have to beat one of these teams. They're 0-4 against the four best teams in the league right now. You've got to win one of those games. I think they played well in Oklahoma City the other day, and it kind of fell apart at the end. That's a very good team, and you saw what they did to the Celtics in the fourth quarter the other day. So I don't think it's just the Knicks. I think that's a really tough test. And look, as guys have pointed out, don't look ahead because Toronto, as bad as they've been this year, have their lineup back in place the other night for the first time. So you've got Quickly, Barrett, in the lineup coming back here to play at the Garden. They won't be taking it lightly, so the Knicks had better not either.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, Scotty Barnes, Quickly, and RJ, I think they played together for the first time the other night. So it's
first time last night.
First time, yeah.
Yep. So it'll be interesting to see how they look at the Garden. And Deej, for you as a fan, do you care about this matchup more than others? Do you care about Hartenstein coming back?
Steve Popper gave the right answer. I'll give you the fan answer. Absolutely. We care about this. We want it back. I was saying before when we went to OKC right before that it was in my eyes maybe a future finals preview because obviously OKC is that good, so losing to them was no bad thing, and especially if you had a 13-14 lead over in Oklahoma City. But now that they're coming home to the Garden, we got to try to protect ours. I think for me, and this is where I was speaking on earlier with Tibbs, the Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson pick and roll that was doing so well versus teams that weren't up to par or up to competition. I think in the fourth quarter, he might have to try to readjust that because he kind of went to that in the last 5 minutes versus OKC in OKC. And it didn't translate so well. So for me, my critique has never been with Tibbs about the minutes. It is what it is. I don't really pay any attention to that. I'm looking at fourth quarter execution, especially like how Steve said against these good teams that were 0-4. Even last year, I think we had a losing record, obviously different roster, but I want to see the late game execution, 5 minutes left, 10-point game, 5-point game. What's the looks, what's the plays that Tibbs is running up? Because I think they should have went a different route, and I don't think they really executed that. I think they should have went with Mikal, and maybe that would be the fourth quarter dynamic between Brunson and Mikal going forward, especially against these good teams. You can't – the Josh Hart and Brunson and pick and pop, it just wasn't working against them. So I think the Raptors game is a trap card, and so like you said, it's RJ quickly coming back to the Garden, so they definitely want to make sure they focus in and not drift off to Friday towards the OKC game. But yeah, of course I want this game. The Knicks fans should want this game.
So we're looking at late game execution. We're looking at early game energy after that low energy night against Orlando. We'll be keeping a close eye on it all here on the Putback. Steve Popper, Newsday NBA writer, Knicks reporter. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at Steve Popper. And Kiingdeej, we appreciate you, man. Knicks Spaces host, Nick at Night. That's at Kiingdeej. Check out him on Twitter too. Here at the Putback, we will be back with you January 14th. I'm sure we'll have some more trade folly to get into. We'll have the Minutes Police update us on where things are, and we'll see where the Knicks are at that point. We hope to see you then.